Hi, I'm Tim Harrison. I'm the Managing Director of Ionic Rare Earth. We're an Australian listed company developing magnet recycling as an alternative path to producing sovereign capability on magnet, specifically heavy rare earths.
Tim, good to see you, sir. Look, I've called you out of the blue just to maybe help us understand a little bit better one of the kind of big moves of the last 5-6 weeks, which was the US Department of Defense investing into MP materials. And I think, and also, I think went under the radar was the fact that Apple agreed to invest $500 million into MP materials around the same time. What do we need to know?
Yeah, look, I think what we're seeing now is with all of the geopolitical moves earlier this year, money is starting to be deployed by the US government. And then quickly on the heels of that, we're seeing industry following. And so I think really encouraging for recycling is the deployment of 500 million by Apple. And I think that's the tip of the spear on the deployment of money from, companies that have billions of dollars worth of value-added products predicated on access to magnet rare earths. And I think the appetite for recycled magnet rare earths, which can be brought online much faster and independently of mine supply, I think creates a great opportunity for what we're doing with Ionic Rare Earths.
Well, let's talk about this, because I think obviously most rare earth companies got a bit of a boost when that announcement was made. So suddenly, critical minerals lists became a little bit more commercial. Money's been thrown by the US Department of Defense and obviously Apple. The difference between processing and recycling is the big story here. So maybe just elucidate on that for people, and obviously maybe dive into the recycling component, if you may.
Yeah, so look, I mean, at a very high level, the advantage of recycling is that it requires a fraction of the capital. It's independent of mine permitting risk, which has been a big challenge, and the social license to operate. And with what we're doing, we're actually separating the magnet rare earths that are in the end of life magnets and the waste materials. We're only separating 4 elements that make up 85-90% of the value of the rare earth supply chain. We're not having to separate all 15 rare earth elements. So it's fundamentally much more straightforward, and we're going straight to the high value rare earth elements that are in demand today. So I think that's the appeal of recycling. It's quick, it's modular, and we can deploy the technology across a number of jurisdictions very quickly.
Okay, so the Apple deal was for 2 components. It was the investing into the recycling facility at Mountain Pass, California, but also the upgrading of the magnet manufacturing at Fort Worth. This is to do one thing and one thing only, and that's reduce the reliance on the Chinese rare earth magnet supply chain. Is this going to be enough?
I think, as I mentioned before, I think it's the tip of the spear, right? Like on the 4th of April this year, China turned the tap off on 7 rare earth elements, those heavy rare earths, that it has a monopoly on. It has control on because of its ionic adsorption clay deposits in southern China and access to the material out of Myanmar. That's why, as Ionic Rare Earths, we've been focusing as a company on magnet and heavy rare earths, because we think that they're the elements that are of most considerable impact. They have the highest scores when it comes to supply chain risk and importance, economic importance. And so our focus on the recycling is immediate to bring online NdPr, but also dysprosium and terbium. And it's important to note that as it stands today, 99 to 100% of commercial quantities of dysprosium and terbium have previously come out of China. And in the last 4 months, since those export restrictions have been put in place, we've been inundated on requests, access to the dysprosium and terbium that we've been producing in our demonstration plant in Belfast. And selling material now, for example, dysprosium at 3 times the price of Chinese quoted prices in Europe. So, there is appetite for this material, and there is a bifurcation on pricing for this highly sought after strategic heavy rare earths.
Well, that has been the problem historically. So as long as I've been involved with it, was the erratic nature around the pricing, caused partly by Chinese control. But the U.S. Department of Defense investing $400 million into MP Materials. Not only do they secure an equity position, but they've introduced a new floor price for NdPr. How does that help companies like you?
Well, again, I think it helps in as far as being able to put a price against NdPr, which is the bulk of the material that we'll be producing, but it enables the dysprosium and terbium price to run. And so if we look at the NdPr price at $110 a kilo, before the floor price was implemented, and even, realistically what those prices look like in China, in April of this year, circa $50 to $60 a kilo. When you factor in the VAT, the $110 is effectively double the prices that were available to non-Chinese producers. So it's increased the NdPr revenue, but we've seen the dysprosium and terbium price go on an absolute tear. And any student of history, go back and have a look at what happened last time when the tap got turned off. 2011, we saw dysprosium price go up 26-fold. And that's all around, China's dominance in the production of heavy rare earths. They turn that off and it becomes a dramatic demand. Where can I get it? And there's not many people who are producing dysprosium today. So I think there's a big advantage for what we're doing with our technology, producing high purity separated dysprosium terbium oxide, and we're being able to sell any excess material we've got right now into supply chains and capacity that's desperate for that material, certainly in Europe and the US.
And how much of the lack of supply is because of the intellectual property, the intellectual capacity, the experience of producing, whether it be from recycled or otherwise, and are technologies evolving and changing, which means there'll be new entrants in here, or do you think that this is still going to be maybe there won't be so many producers of rare earth magnets going forward? And what I'm getting at is how defensible is your project and product?
Yeah, so I think the big advantage here is that for some time now, China has treated the processing of rare earths, the separation, the refining, metals, alloys, magnets, as a state secret. Right, it is controlled information. They retain that information and they monitor people that have that IP. And of late, it's become very difficult to source the materials or the machines and the equipment used in the production of magnets. So certainly, China has really tightened down on the IP aspects of refining, even the mining side of it, the processing of ionic adsorption clays is very closely held IP, but rare earth separation, the refining, metals, alloys, magnets, that is IP that's really hard to develop. And there's a handful of companies out there in the very niche aspects of that who have invested, built capability, demonstrated capability, making products. They'll be the beneficiaries of this new landscape. And I think, given the demand, the opportunity with what we're doing, going to separated oxides, it's a unique offering in recycling. There's other companies out there in the recycling space that are making powder alloys or alloy powders. They're making mixed rare earth oxides. There's limitations with that material. They need additional processing in order to go back to make sintered magnets for high-end applications. That is an entrance for our tech. And so we can take that material, and we have been taking that material. We've been upgrading it. We've been cleaning it up. We've been separating it, producing high purity oxides, and putting that back in the hands of the magnet manufacturers because they need that high purity material in order to make the sintered magnets that are going to go into EVs, that are going to go into wind turbines, that are going to go into military and defense applications. It's all unlocked by the high purity oxides that we're producing with Ionic Technologies.
Talk to me about the market that you operate in, because obviously this deal kind of got all eyes on the space. As I said, it's been a fairly erratic market for, I don't know, past 15, 20 years. With people looking in at this thing, they're going to want to try and understand what the kind of key drivers are. So obviously, securing kind of critical metals and minerals is high on the agenda for the US government at the moment. Dumping this money into one company has made people think that it'll always be like this. The government will keep producing this. There's a point at which sort of a saturation for government requirement is sated, and the market kind of equalizes. So how do you kind of see will we sort of get back to this kind of erratic nature around pricing into the future, or do you think that we'll have to see some sort of normalization quite quickly around pricing for all of the rare earths, not just NdPr?
Yeah, look, I think this is the unknown. It's an unknown, Matt. We just don't know what's going to happen, how much this could run. The reality is that new metals and new magnet capacity. There's a number of other applications that require separated magnet rare earths, NdPr, DyTb. We focus on the magnets because it's sort of 85% of the rare earth value chain. But there are always new technologies coming along that are predicated on access to this material. So my belief, and certainly what we're working on, is establishing relationships with a number of different companies, because we're of the belief and the understanding that there will be more money deployed across a number of different companies to build out resilience in the supply chain, resilience across separation, metals, alloys, and magnets, because ultimately there's a number of high-end applications that require magnets. And it's not just the US market, Europe. Anybody who's looking at industrial development capability, advanced manufacturing, is going to require this material. We've had a lot of inbound inquiry about our recycling tech, and it potentially being a pillar of new rare earth supply chains that will be established by countries. Any country that wants to build magnet capacity, they're going to produce waste. They're going to produce swarf. Through our recycling tech, we can actually deliver the rare earths back into the supply chain, which minimizes the waste and the inefficiencies of certainly the startup of any new capacity. But as that starts to scale up, the more magnets they produce, the more swarf they produce, the more material needs to be recycled. So we do see recycling moving at a dramatic, very fast sort of development and demand profile, built on the fact of the sheer growth of the magnet market ex-China.
It's interesting to me because if I'll compare you to the uranium space, where they've kind of a few sort of ETFs came out of nowhere and kind of created this synthetic overlay. It's a small market, but you're even smaller. Do you sort of see groups maybe kind of try to come in and do something similar?
Look, I think you can do a lot of damage with not a lot in rare earths, because there's not a lot of material out there to begin with. So aggregation of any available, whether it be NdPr or DyTb in a Western context, certainly starts to take that material away from a market that's absolutely searching for it now. So I think any impact from those sort of funds is likely to have a very dramatic impact on specifically heavy rare earth prices, because the reality is that that's the part of the market that's having a hard time being replicated ex-China.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be interesting to sort of see if anyone sort of sees a gap here, or is it just kind of too risky because it's a small market. But the two groups that came into MP were obviously Department of Defense and Apple. They influence their peers, as it were, call the US Department of Defense. They've got peers. Other governments are going to think, well, maybe we should be doing the same. We need to replicate a similar kind of public-private partnership like that. You're going to have the Googles and the Metas of this world thinking, well, hang on, Apple have just jumped ahead of us here. They're going to maybe want to replicate similar sorts of deals. Again, what could that do for companies like yourself?
Well, I think the exciting thing, Matt, is companies like that, they're all looking at what they're going to do for sustainably sourced magnet rare earths. And the appetite for companies like that is to get it from recycling. It creates a great opportunity for a company like us that's out there producing separated rare earth oxides, which is what the supply chain is looking for to make newer, better magnets for products tomorrow, innovative products requiring the next generation of magnets. It's a very exciting phase. And, you mentioned, the deployment of money from the Department of Defense, Apple. I think we're going to see a wave, and we're going to see governments, Western governments, and a certain degree of FOMO kicking in because almost, the bar has been set. We have seen other countries now talk about implementing NdPr prices, floor prices. I mean, the Australian government has mentioned it. I believe that there's also talk of that potentially in Brazil. I think you will start to see governments now implementing structures that incentivize certain capacity, and then it really is going to be dependent on, the overall strategy and ultimately the basket of rare earths that a mine or recycling can produce, and who is the structural, strategic benefactor of that material in the supply chain. They're ultimately going to sponsor this new production capacity coming online.
Yeah, I mean, obviously these kind of multi-billion-dollar companies like Tesla, Microsoft, and Samsung, etc., could dramatically kind of change the space of the market individually. But let me ask about something that you're a bit more exposed to, which is obviously the EU Critical Raw Minerals Act. They've got some pretty tough goals: 40% processing and 25% recycling by 2030. Again, what you're seeing out of Belfast and the conversations you're having with the UK government, is anyone looking to accelerate that?
Yeah, look, I mean, we continue to have a stream of visitors through Belfast, whether it's the UK government. We recently had Minister Sarah Jones there, who's the Minister for the Department of Business and Trade, and she also looks after the energy security and net zero portfolio. Mr. Jones was in Belfast a couple of weeks ago talking about the UK's industrialisation strategy and the upcoming critical raw material strategy and, the role that I think a company like Ionic and Ionic Technologies plays in development of a UK sustainable magnet rare earth supply chain. We've had a stream and flow of companies coming across from Europe, looking at what we're doing in Belfast and wanting to understand how they can participate and get access to the materials that we'll be producing out of Belfast. Not only the first plant in Belfast, but the potential opportunity from European governments to replicate what we're doing in Belfast, because we have got something that's got a technical advantage. I can't stress the importance enough of being able to produce the high purity separated magnet rare earth oxides means that we can produce the materials that ultimately the high-end magnet manufacturers are looking for, because we take the variability out of the materials that are coming back through recycling. They're highly variable because the magnets, there's a range of different magnets, different specifications, and every magnet manufacturer has got a different recipe, a different ingredient mix on the magnet rare earth elements. So that means that in order for that material to come back into the supply chain, it does need to be separated because there is so much variability.
Does the government understand that nuance? Is that an important criteria to them? Is this kind of apolitical in the sense that it's cross the floor or bipartisan, but they also understand what this delivers for them outside of the kind of the politics of it?
Yeah, look, I think that this is where I think in the UK context, we've got enough stakeholders around us in the collaboration frameworks and partnerships and the demonstrators that we've been working with that are telling the government why our technology, our product is differentiated from some of the other recyclers. And it means that when, the next round of funding or the next project is there, especially around automotive applications, EVs and magnets, we're able to produce the materials so that the magnet manufacturers can make and turn into sintered magnets for EVs. That is the advantage. Other techs, other recycling can't achieve that. That's why we're front and center, certainly within the UK, but also a lot of opportunity now to replicate those demonstrator collaborations in the UK now across Europe, the US, and elsewhere around the world.
Okay, and a lot of the questions we get in is about the kind of potential bifurcation around pricing of the market. China has kind of not shut up shop, but certainly made things quite strict with regards to rare earth export bans, etc. Do you see them like making things even stricter? And again, what does that do for you? And is there any kind of I guess predictability about the future behaviors? Say if a politician comes in post Trump and says we want a better relationship with China, does that cause problems?
Who knows what the future's going to hold? But for the next 3 years, I think we've got pretty clear opportunity that there are a number of applications, and certainly within, let's say, for example, the US, policy and law means that applications into the US Department of Defense, the Pentagon, the military, require magnets that are sourced with zero Chinese content. That creates a wonderful opportunity for a company like us. With what we're doing in Belfast, we're an AUKUS opportunity, so we're across certainly, some things that there is collaboration across the US, the UK, and Australia on some very, very strategic hardware. But the ability to replicate that, to pick that technology up, to scale it out multiple sites across the US to deliver what the US is looking for separated magnet rare earth oxides, and bring it online quickly.
Okay. So for the foreseeable future, we deal with what's in front of us.
That's right. I think the other thing, Matt, realistically, do things change in 4 or 5 years' time? Who knows? But is there going to be enough for everybody? Like the sheer number of mines and supply chain development that has to be built for all of the rare earth demand to be satiated, right? Like for all of the mining capacity that's in production now, where are the new mines being built? Where are the new refineries? Where's the new metals, alloys, and magnet capacity coming from? The investment required in order to do that is going to be absolutely beyond belief. This is, again, the advantage of the recycling opportunity because we're nimble. We can build in lockstep with new capacity across metals, alloys, and magnets. And I think we get to take advantage of those spikes in demand and price.
Right. Okay. So look, and I was just talking with your Aussie partner with your Brazilian project in Viridis a second ago. I think things look quite exciting there, by the sounds of what Raphael was saying. But let's talk about Belfast. Like, technically, you've proven that you can recycle magnets. You are pulling out what you need to pull out. The next thing you need to demonstrate is how you kind of scale up through those, this opportunity that we seem to be seeing in front of us. So can you kind of walk us through kind of the process that you're going to go through there?
Yeah, so we're working through the scale out program now. So, the ability to hyperscale the technology, replicate what we're doing in Belfast across multiple sites in very short succession. So strategies and things we're thinking about now is how we design the circuit such that it can be modular in nature and quickly deployed. So that's some work that we're doing and probably want to keep our cards pretty close to our chest around how we're sort of thinking about that. I think that's the big opportunity. How do we create a template that can then quickly be replicated across multiple jurisdictions with partners and the right partners? And I think the opportunity for us is to how we think about developing what we're doing in Belfast, but we think about making sure that we have the support structure and the systems, the processes all in place such that we can very quickly replicate in those target jurisdictions.
But what do you think the kind of USP is here? Because you've kind of got obviously got government involvement for grants and funding and land, etc. But the key to this is always going to be the kind of end of life magnet feedstock, which you've got with EMR. So when you're looking to maybe replicate this or partner with other people replicating it globally, what would you say the sort of the top 3 things are that they're going to need to kind of get in place to be able to kind of replicate what you've got?
Access to materials, access to feedstock, and so typically partnerships. I mean, the big opportunity that we see is access to swarf, right? So access to the material that is produced by our colleagues, our peers in metals, alloys, and magnets. If we take into consideration when we make a magnet, we start with 100 units of rare earth oxides. By the time it goes through the sausage machine and it comes out as a magnet, 60 to 75% of those rare earth units that started here end up in the finished magnet. The rest is waste that's generated in the process. What we do is we're able to take that material. So as the magnet capacity increases, there's this circulating load of material that goes round and round and round. We're tapping into that, right? So the magnet recycling opportunity grows dramatically, goes very quickly. And we bring online also the material coming from end of life. So building out our relationships like EMR, and we're working on those relationships across, the jurisdictions that we're targeting. So access to material. I think number 2 is the tech. Our ability to go from highly variable input to high consistency, high quality product. And that's done through a patented process. We've got 3 patents on the upstream. We've got 5 patents on the SX, right? So on the separation. And so by bringing those 2 together, we're able to produce a high purity separated oxide, which enables us to then leverage that into the relationships that we're working on downstream. And then I think, the third part of what we're doing is we are looking at how we build relationships where the right company, the right partners, whether that's metals, alloys, magnets, we're working closely with the customers. We're looking at different models depending on the access to the material that they've got. Large organizations may have substantially more material, and a tolling model might be appropriate for them. So looking at how we can adopt the right model and the right business for the partners that we're working with.
Because this kind of thing is quite interesting. You've got both US DOD and Apple, I think, could care less about do they need to make money on a partnership like that. You're going to have other groups that are going to need to, you're going to need to demonstrate, well, there's a kind of commercial component to this as well, because there's that whole, what would you call it? You call it like, clean origin narrative. There's the sovereign supply narrative, but there's also got to be a kind of commercial component to this. And so in terms of your discussions with groups or partners globally, what does that conversation look like? Can people make money if they partner with you?
Certainly. I think the reality is that you've got a rare earth industry that's in the billions of dollars of revenue, feeding materials into advanced manufacturing that's got a total value in the trillions. Right? The uplift on the materials we make as key ingredients to unlock advanced manufacturing technologies, high-end applications is dramatic. If we look at, for example, a phone, Apple, maybe it's got a few dollars worth of magnets in it. Do you think they could pay an extra couple of dollars? Do you think they care? I think, it's probably more important that they have access to the material and that they have a sustainable material and its reliable supply chain. So I think for that, if we look at that application, if you look at the defence, I think it's a matter of haves and have-nots. This is material that needs to go into high-end hardware because at the end of the day, national security is predicated on access to that material. So I think there are certain applications, certain drivers for organisations in why they've done the things that they've done. And I think we'll start to see a lot more companies move and follow the lead of those organisations because they simply have to have it. They've got billions of dollars worth of revenue that's predicated on access to, maybe a few $1 million worth of rare earth metals.
Okay. So just to kind of sum up, because I think for some, having looked at, if you've been watching this space the last 10, 15 years, it's been, do I have to kind of pick the right moment to get in and out quickly? Do you think with the kind of the floor being set on NdPr, we can look to see that happening across the other rare earths, and that will that help companies like yourself in terms of a normalization, a leveling off, and a predictability around raising capital, and you can focus on being commercial rather than worrying about how erratic the price of whichever rare earth is at that moment in time.
Yeah, look, I think if we look at sort of, some of the bigger peers in the rare earth space and how their market caps have responded, how their share prices have responded over the last sort of 4 months of fantastic tailwinds in the rare earth space. I think MP Materials has gone from maybe $16 a share to well north of $60, probably $70. So there's a fourfold uplift. Certainly Linus has doubled their market cap and doubled it very quickly. I think over the last sort of 6 weeks, they've had a huge run. And I think it's because they're incumbents. They are going to get access to this elevated pricing. And that's a great opportunity for a company like Ionic, because what we're doing is quick deployment of technology to be an incumbent, to be in production when prices really start to explode. Because I think the reality is that there are a lot of high-end applications. This material is only going to get harder to source. And we're seeing it firsthand. I mean, I think I mentioned to you when we spoke, 6 weeks or so ago, Matt, one magnet manufacturer we spoke to in June had something like 56 inbound inquiries with customers saying, yep, we've got an urgent demand for non-Chinese magnets. We can't get magnets elsewhere, and our boards are now looking for, security of supply. What can you do? And who do you help in that situation? You help the company who's prepared to pay the most.
Okay, so I guess I'm trying to have a bit more of a commercial awareness of what's going on. You've said to me in the past, with if you or battery manufacturers on the OEM side, there's a sort of 10% redundancy, and so feeding into and having conversations with companies like that, is a way that you can get supply for you or your partners. Where else could this supply for all of you or your potential partners globally come from? And is there going to be much competition on the recycling side specifically? This is recycling. People need to understand finding rare earths and digging it out of the ground and all that kind of capex. We're not talking about that. We're talking about recycling. It's the kind of, I guess, cleaner and quicker end of things, but at the end of the day, you still need that supply. Where's it come from?
Great question. Look, I think it comes from a handful of mines that potentially have the right economics, and they'll have the right sponsorship. And you spoke with Raphael. The Viridis opportunity is a really good one because it's a good asset, and it's got a good mix of magnet rare earths. So projects like that have a great chance, but it still requires significant capital investment across certainly the mining. There'll be refining capital required, but then substantial investment across metals, alloys, and magnets. I think the opportunity on the recycling and where we really benefit is, if you take example from the messaging from Apple, their focus is recycled materials, right? Because they've got a customer base that is very very focused on the sustainable aspects of rare earths, and I think you probably also have to some degree a number of potential customers that optically have sensitivity around rare earth mining and being associated with that, and so there is just to some degree a reluctance from the OEMs to have association all the way up to where the primary material is sourced. At the end of the day, the OEMs buy magnets, right? They don't buy oxides. They don't buy mineral concentrates. They buy the magnets. And so there is a bit of a leap of faith, and trying to get the OEMs to go all the way up to the primary supply has been challenging. I think the advantage of what we're doing in recycling, there is a greater affinity from the OEMs, from the advanced manufacturing companies who are very socially conscious of brand and optics. They have a higher affinity to be associated with recycled materials because, who doesn't like recycling? Certainly the governments love it. That creates a great opportunity. And you mentioned before the European Critical Raw Material Act. Policy like that is mandating by the end of this decade, 25% of the rare earth supply chain to come from recycling. So government wants to encourage it. I think it creates this great opportunity for us to be an early mover and to carve out a very nice opportunity size of the pie with regard to the growth that's going to come from recycling of magnet rare earths.
So things looking good at the moment. Quietly confident?
Look, Matt, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. I think we've done the work. We've got a tech that works. It does have advantages over our peers, other opportunities in the space. And I think we're on the cusp of being able to really capitalise on it. I do feel like we are in the eye of the storm. And certainly, what we're seeing is a lot of focus around recycling. Recycling isn't everything. Like, you still need primary supply. And we do want to see primary supply. We want to see the rare earth market grow, because as that grows, the amount of recycled material and swarf that'll come through, creates another stream of material that feeds our technology. So I think we benefit across the sector growing dramatically.